We're in the Bitcoin gold rush. It started in January of 2024, and it will run till about November of 2034. How many people know what happened in November of 2034? In November of 2034, 99% of all the Bitcoin will have been mined, and the last 1% comes out over the next 100 years.
There can only ever be 21 million Bitcoins in the world. If we take out all the Bitcoins that haven't been mined yet, the ones that were lost forever, and the ones in the hands of holders, what is left is a Bitcoin pool. Every day 450 new Bitcoins are mined and potentially join the Bitcoin pool. At the same time, small portions of Bitcoin are constantly being lost. But the biggest impact comes from holders who buy frequently and almost never sell. Which made me wonder, is the Bitcoin pool getting smaller? I am going to look into 4 indicators. Each of them will give us a unique perspective and be classified as positive or negative, to in the end help us answer our question. One thing I quickly realized is that the Bitcoin pool is always changing, possibly becoming slightly bigger or smaller by every day that passes. This means we need to zoom out if we want to find out a pattern. We will start by analyzing one of the simplest yet most overlooked indicators, the Bitcoin trading volume. In this graphic you can see how many Bitcoins were traded in exchanges by month. We can clearly see that during 2020 until the first half of 2021 the volume was pretty high. However, over the months it has been slowly decreasing. And this year in June we had actually an all-time low. Of course, we have to bear in mind that the volume can be higher or lower because of multiple reasons, like political or economical factors that have nothing to do with the pool. When there is high volatility in the price, it is also expected to see the volume going up. But I truly believe that if the number of holders increases, we should also see the volume decreasing over time. Let me show you the numbers. If we look at these 3 time frames, 5 years, 1 year and 3 months, we can clearly see a difference in the average per month. For the last 5 years, we have an average of around 1 million Bitcoins traded per month. But if we do the exact same exercise to last year, the average is less than half of it. While for the last 3 months, the average is only 322,000 Bitcoins traded per month, so it's significantly lower than the previous ones. This means less and less Bitcoins are changing hands per month in exchanges. Of course, this can also be related to how many Bitcoins are in exchanges, as we will see next. But given these observations, I will consider it a positive indicator by itself. The second indicator is highly connected with the previous one. If you are a holder, you know why leaving your Bitcoin on an exchange is something you should avoid. You buy your Bitcoin and then stack it on a long-term storage. That's why the second indicator is the number of Bitcoins on exchanges. Because the less Bitcoins are on exchanges, the less likely they are being used for trading instead of long-term holding. And if we look at the data, you can see that in the beginning of 2024 there were around 2.8 million Bitcoins on exchanges, but not for long. That number has been slowly going down over the next months, and a few days ago there was an all-time low of about 2.12 million Bitcoins. It looks promising, but there is a small detail. This time frame overlaps perfectly with Bitcoin ETFs emerge and mostly explains it. If you look at the biggest ETF graph, you can clearly see that it has an opposite resemblance. The Bitcoins that left the exchanges were most likely bought by these ETFs. Here's the numbers of Bitcoins on each for the last months. While one increases, the other decreases, and if we look at the total, we can see they are pretty much the same. I believe a lot of holders still have their Bitcoins on exchanges, and others might even prefer to buy ETFs but still have the holder mindset. However, as for the data we have analyzed so far, I will consider it's a negative indicator because there are no signs that support the Bitcoin pool is getting smaller. The third indicator is by far my favorite one and will be critical to answer our question. In this graphic, we can see how many bitcoins exist in dormant bitcoin addresses by year. In case you don't know, a dormant address means that although it can be receiving bitcoins all the time, no bitcoins have left that address for X amount of time. To give you an example, there are 1.09 million bitcoins in bitcoin addresses where their last movement out was before 1 January 2010. It is believed that most of these bitcoins belong to Satoshi, the creator of Bitcoin. And as we continue along the graph, the number of bitcoins continues to increase by year. Around 5.76 million bitcoins belong to addresses where their last movement out was before 1 January 2020, so more than 5 years ago. I believe most of these bitcoins are either lost or belong to holders, since the price has increased more than 10x since then and most traders would have already cashed out. I collected data from this graph in April, June and July and compared the evolution of dormant bitcoins with more than 10, 5, 3 and 1 year. Here are the results. If we look at these numbers, we can see that long-term 10 and 5 plus years we are slowly increasing the number of bitcoins being held. 6 million bitcoins not leaving an address for 5 years is a big deal. It's almost a third of the maximum bitcoins that can ever exist. However, at the 3 and 1 plus year there was a reduction in June, which fully recovered by July. To note that even if we see a reduction in dormant bitcoins, it doesn't mean they were sold. It just means there was movements out of some addresses. It could either be moving to a different wallet or taking a small portion out, we don't know. We only know that those bitcoins are not in dormant wallets anymore. Let's see how this data will vary in the future, but my expectation is that if the Bitcoin pool is getting smaller, we will see more and more dormant bitcoins over time, because holders will only buy and not sell, leaving their bitcoins untouched for a long time. This is exactly what me and my friends are doing. Every Sunday we buy a little bit, and we will continue to stack as a long-term reserve. If you are curious to see the complete data by year, put pause on this. To conclude, I consider this indicator very positive. The last indicator we will analyze today is the number of bitcoins held by countries, companies, and ETFs. Let's start with countries. I have been tracking how many bitcoins countries held since April, and interestingly, there is absolutely no change. Bear in mind that this data is collected by public announcements, so it might not be 100% accurate, although I trust my sources. As of now, most countries have bitcoins that they confiscated and most of them just hold for no reason. But even so, I consider that these bitcoins do not belong to the Bitcoin pool. I am very excited to keep tracking this metric because imagine how Bitcoin adoption by countries will affect the Bitcoin pool. Let's see how it develops. Now let's look at the data between April and July from public and private companies as well as Bitcoin ETFs. As we can see, each of them has been increasing the number of bitcoins they held every month, which means there are less bitcoins in the hands of individuals. But what can it tell us about the Bitcoin pool? To answer that question, we need to dig into the data. This is the top 10 public companies in April versus July. If you look at it, 8 companies from April's top 10 are still in July's top 10. And the reason 2 of them left the top is not because they sold, but because other companies bought more. Only 2 of them remain with the same number of bitcoins, and this is only with a 3-month difference. Which means public companies are showing interest in buying and so far not selling. Let's see if the private companies share the same behavior. In these 3 months, the only visible change in the top 10 private companies is that there is a new company on top, River Financial. All the others remain the same without selling or buying any Bitcoin. Again, I emphasize that this information is based on public announcements, so it might not be 100% accurate. This is of course a small sample to make big conclusions, but we are observing a possible holder behavior of companies. I am interested in seeing how this will look like if Bitcoin has a significant fall. Are these companies able to keep holding then? Last but not least, we have ETFs. If we look at the top 10 from April compared to July, we can see that some increased while others decreased, although not significantly. The major change here is BlackRock ETF, which is growing rapidly. ETFs are not holders, but effectively they keep the Bitcoin pool shorter. The growth of Bitcoin ETFs is, in my opinion, an indicator that the Bitcoin pool is actually smaller. I'm also curious to see if the price goes down, how are the ETFs buyers going to behave, and how will this affect the number of Bitcoins held. Wrapping up the last indicator, while countries had no changes, public and private companies have been accumulating a lot of Bitcoin and ETFs are growing rapidly. So because of this, I consider it's a positive indicator. So, to finally answer our question, I will conclude that in July 2025, the Bitcoin pool is getting smaller. We can definitely see a huge downtrend the more time has passed. Question is if it will remain in the future. What do you think? Every month I will be gathering new data and improve the indicators that I use to answer this question. Subscribe if you want to be on top of it. You can see the links to all the sources I used to make this video in the description below. Did I misinterpret the data? Am I missing any major indicator? Please comment below how do you think I can improve this analysis in the future. See you next month.